So I'm sitting here with Joan Gussow. In case people don't know who Joan is, Joan has been teaching a course called Nutritional Ecology at Columbia since the early 70s.
Teachers College.
What's that?
Teachers College. They
Teachers
don't want
College.
to be called Columbia.
Okay, since the early 70s, is that right? And also Joan served as a term on the National Organic Standards Board, sort of working for the U.S. consumer, helping to distinguish, at that time, the U.S. Organic Act, the label going up against...
We were operationalizing the Act, that is, we were making the regs.
And this was in the late 90s, you were there?
Yeah, I guess that's right. When the law was passed in, 92 or so, 92, and they had to operationalize it. And the first thing they brought up was protested so madly by consumers that they pulled it back and we started over again. So, yeah, it was very interesting.
So a couple of things before we get to the question. There was a recent study by the Journal of the American Medical Association showing that nearly 50% of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Coca-Cola, it's been discovered by the New York Times, hired researchers and academics to point the finger of blame for obesity rates at lack of exercise in a bold attempt to mask the role of sugar as the primary cause. And in fact, the CEO of Coca-Cola had the sort of public mea culpa to say that, okay, we've been caught with the hand in the cookie jar or the sugar jar, and we'll be good boys from now on. But despite that, any attempt by states, municipalities to do anything about sugar consumption tax or anything has been beaten back by the sugar industry and the lobby. And then, when you were a member of the Standards Board, you published a piece called "Can an Organic Twinkie Be Certified?", where you argued that this path of reductionism that you called it, where food was, rather than just being as a whole thing, was kind of being taken into its pieces. And then ultimately you could take a junk food then and certify it organic.
Well, the ingredients had to all be organic.
Yes, but you take
as long as you did that, there's no reason why you couldn't compose it any way you wanted.
So then here's the question. I know you don't frequent whole food stores often or at all, and so what can you say about the organic food industry, where fears about organic junk food from sodas to sugar-coated everything have become reality? And the greenwashing part aside, do you think Big Organic should stand for something beyond big profits?
Well, I think I spent a lot of my time on the National Organic Standards Board trying to point out that the Organic Act did not allow any synthetics in processing. None. And that's what the law says. And everyone was, including the lawyers at the USDA who we went down to see, said, oh, well, that doesn't mean that. You're reading it wrong. And said, I wasn't reading it wrong. They write the regs in a way that you can't read them, but I really know that I was right. And therefore, when we tried to establish what you would allow in a processed food, what the things that would be allowed on the, quote, national list, which was the things you could put into a food, we had no criteria. The criteria were all set. There were synthetics allowed in production, and they were things like fence posts and other things like that you would use on a farm. So that was allowed, but the regulations about how you decided what to allow were all related to that. Is it consistent with an organic method of production? Is it whatever? And the very first time I went on the National Organic Standards Board, we were talking about certain products, and I recognized that we were getting these sort of certifications, things about what could be allowed in the food, and they didn't make any sense what the criteria were. The criteria wouldn't help you to know whether it was appropriate to put in processed food or not. So I went back and saw what the law said, and I fought that for the whole time I was on the board. And in the end, as you may know, subsequent to my being on the board, somebody sued them over this issue, and a farmer in Maine, a blueberry farmer in Maine, sued them, got it changed, and so they were now allowed to have synthetics in processing. So my answer to you is, I don't think organic processed foods, other than those like canned tomatoes or something really simple that has I don't think they're worth their price. I would not bother with buying processed foods that were organic, except they are the only way to avoid GMOs. Theoretically, you can't have any GMOs in organic food, and therefore the organic label has been a kind of marker of being free of GMOs. But other than that, they're allowing, as I said years ago, it seems they want a parallel food supply. So when I first went to, I guess I was at the Eco Farm conference in the early 90s, just when we hadn't even got the regs yet, and there was somebody from USDA had heroically come to the meeting, and he got up and he was talking, and there were all these questions, and I said, am I hearing the questions and the answers right? Is what you're trying to create a parallel food supply? That is, if it's present in the food supply, you should also have it in the organic food supply? And somebody said, well, yeah, sort of. And I thought, well, that's it. I mean, if we have a blue cereal named Norman, then we have an organic blue cereal named Norman, right? I mean, it's absurd. But that's what happened. And when Michael Pollan once said to me, Joan, somebody came to me the other day and said they were developing organic high fructose corn syrup. He said, those are words I never thought I would see joined together. And he said, but somebody said to me, isn't it a good idea that a lot of corn is not going to be sprayed with pesticides as a result of this? Because it can't be, because it's organic. And I said, that's really the bottomless hole. If the idea is simply that we have to take the next best. So yes, they've got sugar. Sugar is the American addiction, and we have it put into everything. So why not in organic? They're not going to not use it in organic. And so I just think that buying processed organic foods, I don't think the standards for processed organic foods protect you much from anything. Whereas I think when it comes to fresh produce, I think the production standards are still pretty strong. I think they mean something. So I think if you buy an organic tomato or an organic ear of corn, it means something, that it's grown in a certain way, that I think protects you from the worst sins of industrial agriculture. But I think when it comes to processing, all bets are off.
In that paper about the Twinkie, you also talked about the sort of price of this reductionism, in that food historically was used as a community, it was thought of as a way to bring together community, and now it's just thought about as individual elements. Can you talk a little bit more about what you were getting at?
Well, I don't think, how can I put it? I don't think that the loss of food as community is as much related to, I mean, there was a point in time, which Michael Pollan identified, I give him credit for it, when the FDA said, they had said until this time, which I think was in the 70s, maybe in the 70s, they said, you have to call, if you're going to make a pudding, and you're not going to make it out of the things pudding is normally made out of, like milk and eggs and butter and whatever, I don't know what you make pudding out of, flour, and you're going to make it out of something else, you have to call it imitation. Well, imitation is a crepe label. Nobody wants to put the word imitation on their product, right? I mean, so naturally the food industry lobbied, and finally the FDA took off that thing and said, all you have to do is, it has to be nutritionally equivalent, which is based on the notion that we know everything in food that's important, and that we can identify it. So we have the vitamins and the minerals, and in those days we didn't have anything else. We had none of the anti-cancer elements and things that we've now discovered. And so all you had to do was match the numbers, right? So that just opened the gates. You could make anything. And so that opened the gates to processed food. I think processed food in general and fast food, and the possibility that you didn't have to get together around the dinner table, that we're going to make it so you don't have to get together. You can just pick up food anywhere you are. That's what did us in. That's what did community in. When we didn't have any need to get together to eat, which used to be the big organizing activity of human beings, right? Was getting together, either getting together to collect food, to grow food, to hunt for food, and to sit around and eat it together. That's what food was, the central organizing force of the human race, you know, more than violence. So that's what I think we lost.
So for the everyday consumer who's just looking to do right by their family and buy healthfully and relying on the organic label, what best advice can you give them that would help them?
Buy fresh food. Don't buy processed food. I mean, you can buy, as I said, you can buy canned or frozen foods which are pretty minimally processed, and probably you can buy. I think it would be better if you bought organic, generally, like bread and certain things. But if you're talking about these fancy things that come in all sorts of colors and flavors and that are bars that are put together from hundreds of compounds, if you look at the national list now, there's something called the national list that lists what you're allowed to put into foods. It's getting pretty much eviscerated. I mean, it's pretty much a lot of things on there that you wouldn't really want to see on there. I think if you wouldn't particularly choose to eat them, you know. And I don't keep track of what goes on now because I don't buy processed food. So, you know, I think you can buy things. You can buy simple things. You can buy pasta. You know, you can buy pasta. You can buy simple bread. You can buy probably butter and cheese and things like that are organic are going to be better than the ones that are not. But I don't. If you want to buy, and if you want to buy potato chips, maybe you want to buy corn chips. I would go organic because it doesn't have GMO corn in it. You know, potato chips. I don't know whether it's important that they're organic or not.
And you talked a little bit before about the argument that the industry makes is that they're increasing organic acreage in this. Has that been substantiated?
Oh, well, I'm sure it's true. I mean, if you have all the high fructose corn syrup we have, if you make it organic and they can't use pesticides, then I'm pretty sure that they probably have acreage that isn't covered with pesticides. But I have to say, if you just look at the percent of farmland that's certified organic, I think it's still 1%. They keep saying it's increasing, and it's still 1%. I don't know why, but I've never seen it much above 1, maybe 1.5%. So it can't be making a big difference.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Joan.
Okay.